And now the opposite of prospective studies are retrospective studies. So they look back in time to see how we got here or reconstruct the conditions that led to a current situation. So a really good example of a retrospective research design in health psych is the research used to identify the risk factors that led to the development of AIDS. So initially, researchers believed that men who developed Kaposi sarcoma, a rare cancer, eventually died of general immune system failure. But by taking extensive histories of these men who developed this disease, researchers were able to determine and lead back to the fact that many men who developed the illness were practicing anal intercourse without a condom. So thus, unsafe anal sex was identified as a risk factor for the development of AIDS. And researchers knew risk factors for the disease before they even identified the retrovirus. So retrospective designs can be used to understand how someone would end up in a specific endpoint. So as you recall, patterns of illnesses have changed drastically over the past few centuries, from primarily acute disorders to a surge in chronic illnesses. So the field of epidemiology is responsible for charting and following these changes. Epidemiology is the study of the frequency, distribution, and causes of infectious and non-infectious diseases in a population. So, for example, epidemiologists study who has what kind of cancer, why some cancers are more prevalent than others, why prevalence changes in particular geographic areas or among particular groups of people. Now, in the realm of epidemiology, two significant terms are morbidity and mortality. My dog is squeaking his turtle. Stuffed toy. Morbidity refers to the number of cases of a disease at a given point in time, and this can be expressed in terms of incidence, so the number of new cases, or prevalence, the total number of existing cases. So we've heard this every day throughout this pandemic as people report the prevalence of COVID-19 cases and the incidence of new cases each day. In comparison, mortality is the number of deaths due to particular causes. So this is that grim statistic of how many people have died of COVID-19 each day. So these two statistics are essential for health psychologists. Charting major causes of disease can lead to steps to reduce their occurrence. And as important as mortality is, morbidity is very important as well. Because imagine if we were able to reduce mortality to zero, so no one's dying, but morbidity was still high. So everyone's alive, but people are still sick. Not really a good quality of life. So to protect quality of life, many health psychologists focus on symptom reduction and prevention than mortality rates to improve quality of life for those with chronic illnesses. So the last part that I will touch on briefly is just the methodological tools that have been used in health psychology. So I went over a bunch of different methods of doing research, and I mentioned that a lot of times it could be online surveys, but there could also be manipulation in an experiment. So there are a lot of tools that are used in the realm of health psychology, and these include neuroscience tools, which have expanded significantly in the past few decades. So functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, this allows us to have glimpses into people's actual brains. And this has helped improve knowledge of the autonomic, neuroendocrine, and immune systems, so how they actually work. And we'll get into those systems more in chapter 2. But also, in the past few years specifically, there's been a surge in the use of mobile and wireless technologies, which have been really important so that we can see how these things change and how people experience these illnesses in a natural environment. So things like ambulatory blood pressure monitoring devices, people can record their heart rate and their blood pressure with a phone app every single day, every moment of the day. And we're actually able to use ecological momentary interventions, or EMI, for in-the-moment medical health interventions. And because there's so much research occurring all over the place every day, a very valuable methodological tool is what's known as a meta-analysis. So this combines results from a bunch of different studies to identify how strong evidence is for particular research findings. So if you think back to when I was discussing theory and how they provide a guideline, and this can be useful for comparison purposes, meta-analyses can compare dozens, 100 or more studies at once to look for trends, see how people conducted their studies, see their results, and see how strong the evidence is for something. So say I want to do a meta-analysis of 15 studies that investigated a particular medication. If I'm hoping the medication is successful, hopefully all 15 studies can tell me that they saw great results. So a meta-analysis would bring all those together to see how they looked at these different studies and what they found. And that's a really nice packaged way to see the results of a bunch of different studies at once on a particular thing. So that's everything that I'm covering for chapter 1. Like I said, I cover probably 70 to 80% of every chapter, so make sure you read the rest on your own time, because anything's game for the quizzes and for the midterm. If you have any questions on the lecture material, please reach out to me, my office hours, or by email, especially with the fact that we don't have in-person lectures for you to come up to me at the end of class. But otherwise, next week we will start on chapter 2, and that will be covering all the systems of the body, so it's a bit heavier of a chapter. So if you have any questions as you're reading that, it can always be helpful to come prepared with questions as well.